Welcome back to the Holy Hodgepodge podcast. This is Pastor Josh, and with me today is a special guest. I am joined by Lindsey Maurer. Say hello to the people, Lindsey.
Hello.
I'm sure that many of our listeners do know you, but for those who don't, uh, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So Lindsey Maurer, like Pastor Josh said, I am married to Kyle Maurer. And if you don't know me, it's likely you probably know him. I have
Kodiak.
Kodiak
How many
Kyle.
titles does he have going at this point?
I don't know exactly. 3 maybe?
Do you feel jealous? Do we need to get you some?
I'm okay with I'm just
Okay.
Lindsay.
Okay.
Yeah. But I also have 2 kids, Ethan and Eliza. So people might know them as well. Some of the children that run out after the 8:15 traditional service to go get their donut. They're part of that mob. And then, yeah, I spend my time volunteering here at the school and at the church. And then I work part-time as a mental health counselor.
Okay, and how long have you guys been here at St. Paul?
Um, I have been here since 1996 with my parents. We transferred from Lakewood Lutheran when I was in 6th grade, so that I could go to 7th and 8th grade here. And then, yeah, I've been here ever since. And then when Kyle and I got married, he joined the church, and yeah,
The rest is history, as they say.
it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on. Appreciate having you on. And the reason that we are having Lindsey on is because, as you mentioned, you are a licensed therapist. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. How long have you been doing that?
I have been a counselor for about 14 years.
Okay.
And I got into it pretty much because I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up as a kid. And so in high school, I took a psychology class, and I just loved it. I loved just learning about the why behind what people are doing, right? Like kind of what makes them tick. And so still had no idea what I wanted to do with that, because what does one do with a bachelor's degree in psychology?
Or would it be, why does one do?
All of it. That's the question, all of it. But I still, with the loving support of my parents, pursued psychology, not knowing what that outcome would be. So I went to Lorraine County Community College to get my associate arts degree there. And then from there, I transferred to Bowling Green State University for my Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. Again, graduated with no clue. And so I worked as a pre-employment investigator here in Westlake. Did not love that job. And so then I took a retail management position. Did not love that job. But that store closed. And when that store closed, it was really interesting kind of seeing everybody's reactions to like what was happening in that stressor. And so I had this epiphany, obviously Holy Spirit driven, of I want to go back for counseling. Like I really loved that idea of helping people work through kind of either figuring out what they wanted to do. And so I thought I wanted to go back for career counseling. So I enrolled at John Carroll University for their master's program in community counseling, which spanned every type of counseling. And so once I graduated, then I worked in a private practice. Then I worked at a community college doing academic counseling and crisis counseling. And now I'm working really part-time with a online subscription-based platform. So that's kind of my experience.
And how long have you been doing, and with that, this last step in your journey, that's more, is that more for like, because you said before you were crisis and career counseling, is there more of a focus that you have now, or is that just any kind of counseling? Like, how does that?
Yeah. So what I like to say is the the people I love working with is what we call kind of the worried well. So the people who are living life every day, but they're struggling. Like there's something, either it's anxiety or depression, like there's just something that is just stopping them from just living the life that they kind of want to be living or know they could be living. So just working with them to develop some tools on like doing things differently. And so I've been doing that for, I think, like the past 5 years. But
Okay.
throughout all of it, there's been that thread of, even if it's academic counseling, like there's been that aspect of like, okay, like, why is it that, you know, this is your trajectory? And so, yeah, similar people that I've been working with, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I think that kind of gets to, I alluded to talking about why we are having you on the podcast, and that's to talk about, however you want to label it, right? Therapy, mental health, something that I think historically in general has changed, but also I think in the church, there have kind of been, we'll say, stigmas around that. And so, I'm guessing that, and I think this is probably a generational thing, but depending on who's listening to this right now, they might have clicked on and they're like, okay, I'm giving this 10 minutes. Why, like, I guess I'll put it this way. Why should somebody even consider therapy, right? Again, going back to the fact that historically there has been that stigma around mental health and oh, there must be something really wrong with you.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll kind of open that up to you.
Yeah, well, and even as you're talking about the stigma, I'm thinking of like the term people use, like seeing a shrink, and like that idea of, a head shrinker, right? From, different cultures of like, that's kind of how they
I didn't know that.
deal with like, mental health problems, which they didn't even have that term, mental health. But like it kind of comes through that space, right?
Interesting.
But so I've got the definition of counseling, so I'm going to just read that. It's from the American Counseling Association. And so according to them, counseling is a professional relationship that empowers individuals, families, and groups to accomplish mental health, wellness, education, and career goals. Working with a counselor helps you focus on your mental and emotional health, overcome challenges, meet your goals, lay foundations for a brighter, healthier future. And I like that definition because kind of to answer the question, it's like, why wouldn't you want to work with a counselor, right? Like I love the ending of for a brighter, healthier future.
Yes.
To just do things differently, like I've said. There's a thought, a quote, I think usually attributed to Albert Einstein. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And that's a lot of times how as humans, like we approach things, especially when it comes to interpersonal communication or interpersonal problems. We just have the same patterns. So I'm always going to, come to my boss this particular way, not realizing that, like, it's not that he's a jerk, that, it's not going the way I want, but maybe it also has something to do with my approach when I'm going to him. And so that, too, is a reason to work with a counselor of just seeing how can I be doing things differently? Like, is there something that I can tweak? I like to say that part of my role as a counselor is to hold up a mirror so somebody else can kind of see what they're doing in life. And then walking with them on that journey and kind of working with them of like, okay, well, if this keeps happening, you keep getting fired from your jobs. Like, what do you think could be contributing to that? Could it be, that you're not getting up on time, and that's a trivial or a silly example, but yeah, just looking with them to see what is it that I'm doing that's contributing to this. Because I'll also tell people a lot, like, we can't change other people.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the power to change that person. And usually if I'm in the room with someone, I'll say, we can't change anybody else outside of this room. We don't have that power. I mean, as a parent, like, if you want anything, your kid's not falling asleep. And as much as we want to say, go to sleep, like, that doesn't do it. Like,
Yeah.
they're not going to sleep. We don't have the power over other people like that. We have power over ourselves, again, with the help of the Holy Spirit. We can make our own changes. And so, again, that's kind of what counseling is addressing.
Okay. Now, kind of branching from that, for the lay folk, when it comes to this, would you say this is a social science?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
For the lay folk, which I am, I think we often hear terms like counseling, therapy, psychology, psychiatry. I sometimes hear them used interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
Go into as little or as much depth as you want, but like, is that fair to use those interchangeably? Is there a difference? Like, when we talk about some of those things, what are we talking about?
Yeah, there's a difference. So psychology is your umbrella. So that's kind of the overarching general term, I guess. And so that's the specific study of mind and behavior. And then within psychology, there's going to be different branches. There's going to be maybe like research psychology, behavioral psychology, industrial psychology, sports psychology, and so I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of all of those. But if somebody tells you they're a psychologist, they may not do counseling. They might do research. One of my my favorite podcasters, he's a psychologist, but he's not doing any counseling. But one branch is clinical psychology, and so that specifically is the field which diagnoses and treats mental, emotional, and behavioral issues. And then so I gave that definition for counseling, and a lot of times counseling and therapy are used interchangeably, which, I mean, it's kind of muddying the waters. We really don't have to split hairs because you can. But in general, counseling is short term, and it's more brief, where therapy comes from psychotherapy. So when you hear psychotherapy, you can think of Sigmund Freud with a patient on his couch while he's kind of the quiet, therapist who's just having them talk about their life and their childhood and their relationship with their mom and why things are happening the way they are. And that is long term.
Oh.
But again, the waters are pretty muddy, and so a lot of times you're going to hear them, interchanged. But then to kind of go more in detail with some of, like, if someone's looking for a counselor, who might they be working with? There could be a variety of different people with different degrees. So like a counselor, social worker, psychiatrist, psychologist. The psychiatrist is going to be the licensed physician. He went to medical school, he or she did a psychiatry residency, and then just, that medical expertise, who can also diagnose, but prescribe medications.
Right,
so that's where you're getting, that medication from. Side note, also psychiatric nurses.
Okay,
who
so
can
like
do that
regular
too.
nurses, but just in the...
I don't know if they might be, they might have their master's, or, well, if they're diagnosing, they might have their PhD as a nurse. Yeah, so, yeah.
Okay.
Don't quote me on any of that, but yeah, they're going to have more of that educational skill set to be able to, and legally, prescribe medications.
Okay.
Psychologists usually are not going to prescribe medications. And I say usually because some states might differ on what they can and can't do. I don't think they can in Ohio. But again, the PhD psychologist works in a variety of different fields. So like I said, they might not, even be a counselor. Counseling is just one setting. But then there's social workers. The social worker who provides counseling is going to have a master's degree. And historically, social workers have worked with like the underprivileged and family and social systems, but now like they also, again, will provide counseling or therapy. And then the counselor has a master's degree with broad training in counseling specifically. So my classes were like counseling theory, counseling techniques, addictions counseling, family counseling, group therapy, so taking counseling and then going deep into it in any sort of level. And then there's also like marriage and family therapists.
Right.
They might offer individual counseling. So if somebody's looking for someone, I see how it gets very confusing about well, which what letters am I looking for? And then the other thing I'll just throw out, we might even hear life coach. And I just throw that out because it's not regulated, at least in the state of Ohio. Sure, they might have a certificate or some certification, but as a counselor, for me to practice legally in Ohio, I had to attend a specific master's program. It had to have a certain accreditation. And then I was supervised during a practicum and internship. And then when I graduated, I was supervised for about 3,000 hours.
Wow.
1,500 of them had to be direct face-to-face counseling. And then after those 3,000 hours, I could take another exam to then be independently licensed to not have supervision. And so the licensing board in Ohio for counselors is counselor, social worker, marriage and family therapist, so cswmft.gov. And so that they serve to protect the people. That's their job, to make sure that as counselors, social workers, marriage and family therapists, we're legally and ethically performing our jobs and our duties safely.
So there's a standard that they're held to, whereas a life coach, they don't have. Well, do you have a Hippocratic oath or something like that, or?
Yeah, there's a code of ethics.
Okay, so they wouldn't be held to that per se.
Not legally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so big difference there.
Yeah.
Okay. So I brought up earlier how historically, right, there's been this stigma around mental health, but I would say I don't know how recently. I was about to throw out a number, and then I'm like, I'll just let the experts say how long that has been. But however long ago, there's been an overcorrection where, man, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's cool to have mental health diagnosis, and everybody and their mom is dealing with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So, can you talk to that at all? And as a part of that, what would you say? Because again, I see it as like a pendulum where it's not good to have the stigma around mental health, and it's also not good where everybody has every diagnosis under the sun.
Right.
So where's that balance between those?
Yeah. Everything's that double-edged sword, right? If you lean too far one way, that's not great. If you lean too far the other way, also not great. And I guess when I think of when that could have started to overcorrect, I don't know why my brain goes to 2015, and I have no scientific evidence to back that up. But when I was in my practicum and internship, I was at Baldwin Wallace in their health center. And I remember one of the other interns there, he wrote a pamphlet on overcoming the stigmas of mental health. So at least up until that 2012 time frame, we were still trying to drum up business so we could get our hours for our program to have people come in so we could, see people. I'd be I'm not a betting woman, but I would put money on most college counseling centers having a wait list now. Um, so there has been, that swing to the other side. Um, there, yeah, and there's so much, I think that's gone into that, which again we'll, I think, continue to get into some of that as we talk. Just our culture and all of just the changes that have happened really fast. I can think of a book that I read, called The Coddling of the American Mind. And I read that working at the community college, and just this idea that we're not helping the up and coming generations by giving them safe rooms on campus, and deeming certain topics as violence. There's just this fragile nature that is kind of being promoted, I guess. And that's been kind of a part of the overreach, I think, if we could call it that, of that mental health stigma going away, and now people kind of gravitating towards that. Even as you were asking that question, I'm thinking, like, there is an Instagram account called Stuff My Therapist Says. Like, it's just very much that, like, oh yeah, my therapist this, my therapist that. Like, it's become just that cultural norm, which I don't think it's awful. But again, if you are given a diagnosis, I mean, sometimes you then assume that that's all I am. It's my anxiety. I can't do that because my anxiety, is too much when you ask me to do that sort of thing, and you kind of get locked in that space.
Which I think goes perfectly with the coddling kind of.
Yeah.
It's saying you can remove yourself from the situation if it's getting too uncomfortable, versus, I'm sure when we were growing up, where it was like, no, you got a tough situation, sucks.
Yeah.
You deal with it.
Yeah.
And man, there's such a difference in that. Yeah. And so, yeah, those two things really go hand in hand, and that always fascinates me. Yeah. Like, this kind of a side note thing, but I always love watching well done documentaries when it's like, you are familiar with this big event in history, but what led up to it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And man, there's going to be, in 2040, there's going to be some very fascinating documentaries that come out. And I think there's a lot that has to do with, we won't go down this unless you want to. I think legalizing of same-sex marriage, I think that had such a monumental impact on where we are today in so many ways. And I'm honestly scared for where I think things are going to go. But it's stuff like that where you don't think it's going to have a direct impact, and then, oh man, it really does.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and on that same note, my tangent would be a technology tangent. The individual that created the infinity button when you scroll. So do you remember, if you would Google something, you'd get to the end. Yeah. It would go down, and then you'd have to click page 2, click page 3. And so some brilliant mind in Silicon Valley was like, wouldn't it be awesome if we didn't have to do that? That same person regrets it.
Really?
Seeing what that's created has been like, okay, that not great for where it's taken us in doom scrolling. Yeah.
Oh, that's oh man, that's always when the person who invented it regrets it. That should give you pause for concern. Yeah. Okay, so obviously there's a balance, right? How do you think that balance plays out? And like are there other parts of ourselves that that contribute to this, because like I think kind of going along with that doom scrolling, if somebody's dealing with anxiety, for example, and they're just doom scrolling, that is going to contribute to being more anxious.
Yeah.
So are there other parts of our lives that kind of contribute and help get balance with some of this stuff?
Yeah. And so I think when we had talked, you had mentioned that pastors use the wheel of wellness, right? And I don't usually use that in my practice, but with you reminding me that it exists, I'm totally gonna run with it, because I've seen it in like health coaching and other areas. And so picture a pie chart, and there's evenly sliced pies, and it's a visual tool to kind of see different aspects of a person's life: their sleep, nutrition, social connection, stress resilience, physical activity, and mindset. So the idea is we want these pieces even, because if my sleep is this tiny sliver, that's not healthy.
Right.
If my nutrition, if all I'm eating is McDonald's every day, that's not healthy for my body. And so making sure you can kind of use this tool as a guiding reference point of, okay, like, are things out of whack? What area might I want to work on? And so again, that balance of, hey, I think I'm in a space where things are pretty even, so I'm just going to keep moving forward. Or, this stress resilience, this thing just happened, or this thing that I experienced in the past keeps popping up, and so I need to then, talk to somebody to manage what I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah, and to kind of tie that, because, which by the way, for listeners, you're gonna see how this obviously, and if you don't already, that I should say, how this connects spiritually, right? We're gonna get some more specific, but. I just want to point out right now too that like all that you just said goes along with a good Christian worldview, right? And I've tried to highlight this in previous sermons, like, it's not just I'm a body and soul, it's that simple, right? Like we have emotions, we like there are so many different things, and I think Pastor Smith brought this up in a sermon recently, but like if you are experiencing chronic pain, like that is going to affect you emotionally, and that is going to have an effect on how you relate to God during that season. And so like to live a well-balanced life with these things is good, right? Like God made us needing sleep, needing food, needing relationships, needing purpose, all this stuff. And so when those things get out of whack, it is going to affect us, the whole person. And you might be able to trek along for a while without it. Like you can get by eating McDonald's for a month.
Yeah, it's food, it's keeping you alive.
Yes, you can get by without physical exercise for a while. And maybe you don't even see the effects right away or for a while, but all these things make who we are, and so you can't just ignore them.
Right, and I'd even add to that, you can't ignore your emotions either. Again, cliche thing.
Can you say that one more time?
Cliche thing to hear from the therapist, right? You can't ignore your emotions. And there's a book that I love called Why Emotions Matter. It's written by Tristan Collins and Jonathan Collins of the Bible Project. And I think it's just a really cool book, and they kind of give this example of your emotions are like the dashboard on your car. They're there to tell you something. You don't want to ignore it, because when you need gas and you ignore that, what happens? When your oil light goes on, check engine light goes on, and you ignore it, like that's awful for your car. Like again, like eating McDonald's every day, your car will still get you places, but there's an end point. Like
Yes.
your car's going to be the car on the side of the highway, and your hazards are on, and you're looking for help. And so, kind of understanding your emotions, and again, that's where a counselor could step in. Understanding when you're experiencing these emotions and kind of making sense of like, okay, like this keeps happening and it's upsetting me, but like I notice nobody else, got upset or gets upset when this sort of thing happens. And so working with someone to kind of untangle that sort of emotional experience.
Yeah. Two follow-up questions from that. What would you say? So you talked about like ignoring the change oil light. Eventually, you're going to end up broken down the side of the highway. What does that look like when you ignore your emotions? What's that end point?
I think for the easiest one for me to look at is anger. Um, I will tell kids anger sits on top of what you don't want to sit with. Sadness often masquerades as anger. It kind of bubbles up. Embarrassment. Like there's so many different emotions that can kind of bubble up. And so anger is actually like that last kind of thing. And so if somebody like notices themselves like getting angry, like that's definitely something that isn't helpful. And might not be super healthy, depending on how they're dealing with it. But I would also say, like, when the emotion that they're experiencing is stopping them from meaningful experiences. So when the mom with a newborn is so depressed, again, because there's a flood of emotions, hormonal and all of that. And so there's that question of like, which, like, is this normal? And so just, again, having somebody to talk through of all of this change, I don't know what to do, is how I'm responding to this, is this helpful? And so again, yeah, that place where you've kind of come to that point of what I'm doing isn't working.
Yeah, going back to the insanity
Yeah.
quote.
Mm-hmm.
My other question is more lighthearted. Have you seen the Inside Out movies?
I have.
What are your thoughts on them?
I'm a little biased because I think at least the second one, my professor from John Carroll was one of the consultants on the film.
Oh.
Dr. Lisa D'Amour, who also, she has a podcast, and she lives here in Cleveland on the east side, and she has books. She's great. So I loved them because I love her. But I thought they did, so naturally, I thought they did a really great representation of just how those emotions can kind of like vie for center stage and really want to be the one who's like prominent.
I did not know they consulted with anybody. That's
Yeah.
Well, it's my turn to pick movie night this week. That I was not sure where I was going to go, so that might
There you go.
jockey for where we're going to go. Okay, so if somebody, and assuming somebody listening was on the fence about going to a counselor or therapist, what would you say? And you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but what would you say some of the benefits of that would be?
Yeah. Well, the benefit might be that you could get better. Like you could feel better, and things, you might manage things and handle things differently, which then result in just things working a little bit different and better for you. And you'd also ideally have tangible tools for just whatever life stressors are. When I'm working with someone and getting to know them and kind of working with, helping them figure out tools that will then benefit them in their lives, I'll always tell them, like, counseling isn't forever. Like, we're not doing this forever. I would actually be a very bad counselor if I kept you on my caseload for forever. But life happens, and so come back when you need to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've, seen people who, have done that where like, okay, like I keep forgetting the tools, and so I want to, I want some more help.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's good. Now, kind of follow up from that, if somebody's looking for, because like you said, there's a lot when it comes to deciding who to go with and all that. Are there some good tidbits for finding the right one? Right? Because, I for the last 3 years have seen a couple different counselors,
Mm-hmm.
also via online,
Mm-hmm.
and man, there was a lot of different options, a lot of different focuses. It's like, here's one that focuses on ADHD. Here's one, and I'm like, holy cow!
Yeah.
And then there's some that are Christian counselors,
Mm-hmm.
and so how should somebody find the right counselor?
Yeah. Well, my first thing to tell someone is to pray. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't go into that on your own steam. Like, invite the Holy Spirit into that selection process, because you're going to be led to someone who's a good fit. You might be led to someone who's not a good fit first, to then find somebody who's a good fit. And that's always what I'll tell people is when I'm first meeting with them is I might not be for you. There might be somebody better. And don't hesitate to let me know that this isn't a good fit and you're going to find someone else. Let me know, why, because I might be able to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you wanted to be called Joe and not Joseph, right? Like, I didn't realize, like, whatever. And so it could be something that I could just fix and, we can move on.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I always kind of use the example of your first day of school in kindergarten when you're brand new and you don't really know anybody. You learn over time, these are my people. Like, this is the person that I gravitate to. Like, I really like, this type of person. And it's kind of the similar strategy with counseling of, wow, like, I've sat with you for a session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions, and like, I just don't feel the fit. And so, again, addressing it like, hey, I'm going to make a switch because I want to work with somebody, a man or a woman, or, somebody who focuses on this, that. So yeah, that would be my first thing of praying.
Can I interject
Yes.
follow up? Would you recommend, like, if a man is going to seek counseling, would you recommend seeking somebody of the same gender, the opposite?
Right.
Like, what would you say for that?
Well, it's that typical counselor response of, that depends. There really isn't. Because it does. It depends on the scenario, the situation. In Stephen ministry, yes, a man's going to work with a man, a woman's going to work with a woman. I have worked with a man who, given their the stuff they brought with them, their baggage and their history, it made sense to work with a woman. And my hope was later down the road they could work with a man, to have that male bonding and that male figure in their life. And so that's why it just depends. Like, it's kind of what you're looking for. So if there is someone who, has a bunch of sisters and feels really comfortable, working with a woman, like, start there.
Yeah.
Right? So to continue that, like, what should someone look for? Does it need to be a Christian counselor? Sure, if they want one, right? I have a colleague who I don't think she would consider herself a Christian, but will welcome praying with people, because that's part of our academic training, is being non-judgmental and walking with anybody from any avenue on their life's journey. And so, again, not putting our beliefs and not pushing that on them.
Mm-hmm.
So this non-Christian counselor can't, like, she works great with, you know, her Christian clients, recognizing that, like, yeah, this is a valuable thing to them. And so I want them to use that. But again, if somebody really wants to work with a Christian counselor, it's kind of just asking, you know, if you're calling locations, just asking, like, hey, do you have any Christian counselors on staff? And there's, I think, even a slight nuance between Christian counselor versus a counselor who is Christian.
Right.
A Christian counselor may have attended like a Bible college, specifically, and then might even like be associated with like a specific like Christian counseling association,
Okay.
something like that. I am a counselor who is Christian, so people have found me that way. The platform I work with has a box that I can click of accepting Christian clients. And so I've had quite a few who come through, and I let them know I am no biblical scholar. Like, I attend church and I have wonderful pastors who impart their knowledge and wisdom. I attend Bible studies. I read my Bible. And so that's what you're going to get. Somebody who is a Christian walking through life and bringing in this information. But again, I've never taken a theology class. And so far, people have been like, oh, all right, let's do this.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, you talked about like comparing with first or with kindergarten, you know, over time you kind of get some of those, you just figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any things that you would say if somebody, whether it's them or somebody that they know that is like yeah, you shouldn't, like, let's say this is the first counselor you ever come into contact with, if they do this, run?
I'm sure there are things, and off the bat, I can't think of any specific like red flag. If you know a lot about your counselor, that's a red flag.
Okay.
Again, as the relationship continues on, you're gonna learn. I can't see them past 5, and you might then learn through your back and forth, like, oh, because they play volleyball. If your counselor talks more about them than they talk about you, probably not a good fit. Again, there's always a caveat. It could be because you're not talking much, and they're trying to establish rapport with you. But in general, you really shouldn't know a whole lot. Most of my clients are well aware that I am married and I have kids. Because I'm working from home, they'll probably find out that I have a dog when she's barking at something. But again, it's not my place to like go on and on about that. I will bring things up as it relates to our conversation, but I think that would be just kind of my common thought of a big red flag.
Yeah, that's totally fair, and I think, yeah, never mind. All right, so this conversation about mental health therapy has been more kind of general, but we are going to get more specific, and this is actually what started us down this path of me reaching out to you. I came across somebody had posted on X a picture of the headline of an article from the Wall Street Journal called "Are Therapists to Blame for the Rise of Adults Cutting Off Their Parents?" This is something that, man, sadly is becoming a trend. I know several people even in the church that applies to, where they either cut off parents, friends, or other family without warning, and they don't even get really the right to know why. It's just they're cut off. And so Uh, Before we get into specifics with that, initial reactions to that trend.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. So you mentioned that article, and I dropped the $2 a week to go and pass that paywall to get the article because
Which
I was
that
so intrigued.
was a very sad read.
Yeah.
Oh, that
Yeah.
was heartbreaking.
Yes.
Just basically, this person was talking about how, was it 10 years?
Yeah.
10 years of her life with no contact with parents,
Yeah.
grandparents. She lost grandparents. She fell in love, got married, had a child during that time. I mean,
Yeah.
heartbreaking
Well,
to read.
and so the article even points out that it was in the second session, and my heart dropped, my stomach dropped when I read that. Like in the second session where this therapist said to cut off ties. I mean, I could go down that path. The other thing in the article that jumped out was, and I forget how it was worded, but the individual who was seeking counseling was, I don't want to say an immigrant, but was not native to the United States. And that's something they hit hard in counseling, of know the culture of the person with whom you're working. You can't assume that your background and experience meets them. And so we know that there are certain cultures, like if I'm working with somebody who is over here from Japan, that's probably going to be the last thing I'm going to do, to be like cut off contact with mom, because that's not what they do there. So yeah, there were so many things in that article. But then after that, I saw there was an article in the New York Times and the New Yorker, that same idea. And I found one on Yahoo, like all of these different articles with that same idea. The one thing that stood out though in that question was like, often, how did you word it? Cutting off contact without warning. And that has me kind of like, if we were in a counseling session and you were like, they cut me off without warning, I'd be like, wait, tell me a little bit about the relationship. Because that seems interesting, that it would be so abrupt. But I don't doubt that it happens, right? Mm-hmm. I would imagine that there are people who are like, punk, like, we are done here. And there was this interesting quote that I read, that it says, so within the parent-child context, the parents remember the last straw. The child remembers the whole pile. And so there could be reasons that, somebody's cutting off contact. And one of the articles listed a handful of reasons. So like emotional and verbal abuse, repeated boundary violations, enmeshment and control, value and lifestyle clashes, substance abuse and unsafe behavior, childhood neglect or trauma. So my hunch is value and lifestyle clashes are really what's the uptick here. And that I could see somebody being like, I'm sick of hearing my conservative parents talk about how I'm living outside of God's, command, and just be done with it. But I would question, like, what led up, like, what do you recall that led up to it? Was it all of a sudden? And I would also wonder, is it completely cutting off, or is it somebody setting boundaries? Because again, I have not worked with anybody who has been like, I'm done with my, this person in my life. I'm done with my mom and dad. But I've worked with quite a few who have been like, oh my goodness, I can't do this relationship anymore. Like, I don't know what to do. And they came to me weary, right? Of like, they're my parents and I love them, but like, my goodness.
Yeah.
What are they thinking? And so my comment to them has always been, first of all, I don't know your parents. Never met them. Can't, because of, dual relationships and all of that. Like, it's not for me to know them. So I'm taking in what you're telling me. And I see that, like, it sounds like you're pretty well functioning. Like, you've got a good handle on life. So I'm willing to bet your parents did the best that they knew they could do. They did the best with the resources they had. They did the best, as they could do as parents. And we don't know what they went through as a parent. And so I'll encourage my clients to kind of look back. And that's kind of been eye-opening too, of, it just bothers me when they do this. And I'll say, can you tell me a little bit about your parents, like, and their experience as kids? Like, as much as you know, because sometimes there's a very, unknown quality of, like, no, I don't know. But sometimes it's been like, oh, yeah, my mom's dad was overseas and my mom was a single mom. And, then, so whatever it might be, like, that has been an interesting way to shed some light.
Yeah, when you say that, I think about a picture I've seen where it's like several, like, each person is like lower than the previous one,
Yeah.
and there's like a bunch of like darts being fired at the one on top, and then each one is less and less. And
Yeah.
I think there is something of that, like I think about both my parents' upbringings, and my dad talks about, like, just culturally,
Yeah.
like he talks about in Catholic school getting slapped from the nuns,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
and that's the world that they lived in. And, just thinking about, like, our parents protecting us from more than they got.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there is something to that. And it's, you really do have to look and see how, like you said, they were doing the best with what they could.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't excuse all their mistakes.
Right.
And I think that's where how we as Christians deal with transgressions and forgiveness.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, maybe that's one of the strengths of our generation, is like not being afraid to admit fault to our kids and ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't know if, I know my parents as kids, the parent was never wrong, right? And if you pointed something out, you probably got the tar beat out of you.
Yeah, the belt or
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is something to that.
Yeah.
We are trying to do better than what we had.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be faults.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I even want to, like, take a second to just really be obvious with, the idea that there could be reasons that it makes sense. And again, I think those, in at least the context of, the people who have approached you, I think those are the outliers. That's the abuse. Those are the relationships where there were extreme violations on how somebody treats a child, right? Like, just these huge extremes that take, kids into a very unsafe place. So now the kid's grown up and it's like, wait, that's not normal?
Yeah.
So there will be very extreme examples on, yep, this might make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But again, those are our outliers. They're not our, like, everyday experiences.
Right.
And even in those cases, if they're working with a therapist, they're gonna really process through, what's the healthiest. Is it in fact, cutting off that relationship? And again, in very few cases of that extreme idea, it might be valid.
Yeah. I think, it's kind of like one of those where, I don't know if it's a one-to-one comparison, but I think about, Pharisees asking Jesus about divorce, and Jesus, says, well, that was not God's plan. It was for this reason:
Yeah.
a man shall leave his father and mother, and the two shall join in one flesh. But he's like, it was your hardness of hearts, right?
Yeah.
Like there was. Pastor Smith uses this illustration. I'm stealing it from him. I'll give him credit for it. But on airplanes, like everybody knows it's illegal to smoke
Yes.
on an airplane.
Yes.
But in airplanes, what do they also have? A place to put your cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not what we want.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want people cutting off relationships, but like if there's a situation where, like, this again is an extreme example, but if somebody is like, I'm thinking about taking my life,
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
I can't deal with this pressure, like, clearly,
Yeah.
them cutting off that relationship is better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's, like we've been saying, though, those are the very rare
Mm-hmm.
kind of instances. But kind of going back in general, with this trend of people cutting off, we'll say parents, but again,
Right.
can be anybody. Why do you think it's become such a trend? And
Yeah.
how long would you say that has been a trend for, if you had to guess?
I don't know. I mean, again, in my brain, I want to go back to like 2015. Again, I have no specific reason for
Right.
why my brain wants to go there, right now. But I mean, there's always been some, random examples of, Susie Q's not talking to her daughters right now. So just these random things. So yeah, I can't think of a specific, like this is when it started, but again, there's a lot of polarization.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, there's a lot of, it's going back to that earlier part in our conversation of just that coddling, that anti-fragility, that I don't want to be around anything that doesn't make me feel good. I want my coffee in my hand and my soft sweater and my fuzzy slippers, and I want to be cozy. When we know since, Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, like, things aren't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually not an option,
Yeah.
this side of eternity, to live in perfection. But again, our secular world really wants us to find that. It really pushes, well, things can be better if this is gone, this is gone, this is gone, that person's gone, so get rid of them. So we have that cancel culture. And we also have, and this might be really extreme, but I think we've got one of the most selfish cultures in the history of mankind. Again, I love history, and so I know that there have been weird things that have happened, selfish cultures, but like, there's a lot of self-centeredness. It's that you do you. You do what you want to do. Happiness at the expense of any other person.
Mm-hmm.
Do what makes you happy. No, as Christians, like, that's not the thing.
Yeah.
Like, we follow Jesus. Period.
Yeah.
Like, and we might not have happy days, but we can still, count it all joy, right? We can still recognize that, like, even though this world has so much yuckiness and so much junk, like, there's a better eternity waiting for me. So again, I would kind of point to that culture, that secular culture of, we just want to be cozy. Any discomfort needs to be eliminated. And so I work with clients a lot about, let's sit with the discomfort. And so if they're telling me, about their anxiety, I'm like, let's just sit there for a second. And let's see what that feels like. Do you notice it doesn't feel good, but we can sit here and notice that it's here. nobody wants to do that, right? No, nobody wants to be uncomfortable.
And I think that is an unfortunate pairing with living in kind of an instant gratification
Yeah.
too. Like,
Yeah.
really, we're at such an interesting time culturally where we've got freedom of expression
Yeah.
along with anything you could want instantly at your
Yeah.
fingertips.
Yeah.
And that makes for such a messed up hodgepodge.
Yeah.
See what I did there? Yeah. And that is very dangerous.
Yeah.
It really, like, if it's convenient for me to cut this person out who has cared for me for 32 years,
Yeah.
then, then it's fine. And it's just instant. It's not thinking about how is this going to affect them. It's all about how is it going to affect me, and probably not even long term. It's right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, just, this is probably a specific scenario, but let's say somebody, 23-year-old is on their, is getting this kind of counseling, and they're on their parents' health insurance.
Right.
Right? Like clearly you're not thinking through that.
Yeah.
It is all about what serves me and what serves me right now.
Yeah, and even about that, like instant gratification, social media plays a huge part in this, because we do have influencers who are touting the benefits of going no contact, and you see how wonderful their lives are. They're in their beautiful living room talking about all of this. Well, surely they know what they're talking about, and I'm being very sarcastic with that.
Yeah.
And so again, it's that, but also, about that polarization. I can't help but think that, like, at one point in time, in the not so distant past, we only got our news from very specific places in Cleveland: Channel 3, 5, 8, 19, the Plain Dealer, the Chronicle, the Journal. Like, that's where we got our news. You turned the TV off, and then you went to work, you got in the car, listening to Q104 or 105.7 or whatever, and you listened to those morning shows, you got out of the car, you went to work. There were stopping points to what news was influencing you. That doesn't exist anymore. And I mean, we can always say, journalists, blah, 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 like, they're spinning stories, but to be a journalist, there was always some sort of code of ethics, right? I don't know I don't think there was like a specific, but I think there was this personal understanding of, well, yeah, I'm going to tell a true story. And what we see now are people, it could be anybody, putting, quote, their truth out there. And we don't distill that. We just take it in. And so, again, as Christians, we should be very cautious just listening to the man on the corner of the street with a blowhorn. Like, I can't even imagine that, if we rewind to the year 2000. Like, how many of us would get our news from that guy? I don't think anybody.
Right.
But now we are. Like, that's who's influencing
And there's
us.
a lot more men on the corner.
Yes.
Everybody walking around has their own blowhorn.
Yeah. And so if that man on the corner is telling me how great his life is now because he cut off his parents, I'm going to be like, okay. Good for you. And I'm going to go about my day. But now, why is it that we just take it as, okay, this person who I follow, and I follow about fitness, but now they just told me about their relationship. They really got personal. Like, I actually don't know you, and they don't know me.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is like, they don't know you, right? They can share parts about their life which may or may not be true.
Yeah.
And then also there's, their perspective versus others, but a lot of people take it as gospel.
Yeah.
This specific thing worked for them, so therefore it's going to work for me. But in reality, there's always nuance.
Yes. Yeah, there's always that shade of gray.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's just say that some of the people listening have somebody in their life that has kind of cut them off.
Yeah.
what should they do? Like, how should they handle this situation?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I'm going to say pray.
Yeah.
Right? Again, don't go through this alone. So pray, and not just the prayer of change their heart, but that humble prayer of help me understand their experience. They're very mad at me right now, or they don't like my beliefs. And Lord, I trust you and I trust Scripture. So I'm not changing those beliefs, but help me to understand maybe what they're trying to tell me.
Which, but if I can interject, if it is something that is like a belief, this is the part that you probably don't want to hear. But this is one of those where, when Jesus says, "If you do not hate your father, your mother, your
Yes.
your spouse, your child, for the sake of me, you're not worthy to follow me."
Yeah.
This is an example of that, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, Jesus is not saying hate those people, but it's
Right.
it's a comparison and contrast, right? If you are willing to put aside your faith to be closer to that
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
that basically what I'm saying is that might be a cost to following Jesus.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, you've got brothers and sisters in Christ here that we will hug you, we will cry on your shoulder with you, and there's not necessarily a fixing that.
Right.
That's just kind of there is no making that part better,
Right.
but you are not in it alone.
Right.
So just wanted to say that because, I just felt like that was important. I said that.
Yeah, and so it's recognizing you're not alone, because we're here as the church to support you. And so again, I would say, like, humbly consider, what that said, or what that argument was, what they said, and wonder, like, okay, like, if that's true, what's that mean? There was, and so this is more the parent-child relationship, but a quote from Dr. Kurt Thompson. So he's a psychiatrist out of Virginia.
I just was recommended his book, Anatomy of the Soul.
Yes, yeah. He's got. I listened to a podcast. Like he's great. And so he said, parents measure success by what's been done: food on the table, roof over their heads, cars to get them places, college tuition paid for. Children measure success by how they were made to feel. And so for those instances, I mean, I can hear those arguments, like, I did blah, 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 blah. And the kid's like, I just want to, my parent to be there for the first night I was pitching, and they had to, meet up with their buddy, or, whatever. And so it's that presence.
Yeah. So at the time of recording this, we last night had our Man Up men's group, and I brought up, we're talking about following Christ's example of loving, and I brought up the 5 love languages.
Yep.
And gift giving, words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, and
Acts of service.
And it's almost like parents, it's they focus on the tangible, I got you the stuff you need, I got you through life how you need. And kids, it's more of like the quality time, the words of affirmation. And not that it's always that cut and dry, but like when thinking about like how does one feel loved, like parents, well, you're loved and cared for, like you've got everything you need. You got into this great school,
and you have way more than I had.
Yes. And and that can be unintentionally weaponized. Because do parents give a lot to take care of their kids? Yes. But it's kind of like Paul in 1 Corinthians 13, where it's like, you can do all this stuff, but if you've not loved, you've done nothing, right? You can provide for this, and if your children don't feel loved and cared for, well, there's still a very big gap there. And so you can do the right things and not end up being in the right in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's, there's always like a caution with what you're saying, because, you know, I don't want you to feel bad, like, oh, well, I do have a meeting tonight, or I couldn't put them to bed last night. But again, it's the habits.
Yes.
It's the habitual, like, well, Dad's always working late in a job that, like, he actually has the ability to cut off at a certain point, but is just very ambitious and doesn't. And he missed my game all the time.
Right.
Like, so that's the difference. It's, you know, a couple meetings, that's not gonna, you know, make or break things, but it's those pivotal things where there was the opportunity that wasn't taken.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then also, just this idea of when things are happening to us, and again, taking that in prayer, and kind of again reflecting, you know, this is my experience. How can I learn and grow? And questioning, I love this question, and I can't take credit for it. In what ways have I gone no contact with God? How am I cutting him off? How am I prioritizing things of this world, which could be good things, but I'm not putting God first.
Yeah.
And so welcoming that opportunity of, okay, this is happening, and how can I then reflect on my relationship with the Creator?
Yeah, and that I think does tie in too with what you were saying before of like kind of seeing this, you know, this part I think is not easy, but having the humility to see kind of like seeing how you are like that with God, but then also seeing like maybe I am responsible for some things. Like that's not me saying that if somebody's cut you out of their life, you are at fault.
Right.
But you can be right and then still be wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like kind of like what we were just talking about, where you can say, well, I provided for them, I did X, Y, and Z, but if you're not willing to put yourself in their shoes and try to be empathetic and, you know, like you're not really loving them how they need to be loved. And so again, that takes humility, and it takes grace. Like, because in the one sense you could say, well, I've given so much, I don't need to, they don't deserve it, or you could make those arguments, but to actually love them, you know, to show love, you need to follow what Jesus did, which is sacrifice. And that, again, it is humbling to be at that point, but if there's something to do like that, that would be it. Do you have anything more to add, though?
I mean, I'm sure, but for the sake of time, I'm going to say no.
All right. Well, one last question, and this kind of going back to our earlier topic, but I think it's a good place to close out kind of this whole conversation. Do you have any more general advice, like, you know, let's say somebody was on the fence about seeking out counseling, and they listen to this and they're like, all right, you've convinced me. What would some good next steps be for somebody who's seeking that?
I think kind of determining where your comfortability is. Do you want to see somebody in person, or do you want to see someone online? Again, both are valid and will work. I think in person is going to give you more ability to kind of let them see who you are. But again, it's a really valuable option, because you can kind of fit it in whenever, and it's almost like the possibilities are endless with who you can work with. And so again, I'll say to pray, you know, just, you know, asking for that guidance on leading you to the person who is going to be a good and helpful fit. And so beyond that, when you do meet with someone, again, trusting trusting the Holy Spirit and that kind of gut feeling of, does it feel like this person is somebody who God put in front of me to help me, and kind of trusting that. And again, if it doesn't feel like it's a good fit, know that you can make a change. Sometimes, if you just don't like what's being said, it might be worthwhile to like stick that out a little bit. But yeah, again, it's that idea of like, you're not doing this alone, because you know Jesus is with you. He's going to be in the room, and so allowing that to be kind of that comfort for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there are a lot of good options, and I think there are so many different people. Like I mentioned before, right?
Yeah.
You can find, like, if you are wanting to talk about a specific
Mm-hmm.
thing, like
Mm-hmm.
how do I deal with my child who has ADHD,
Yeah.
or like you can get those specialists,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
that I think would be, there's just so many options,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
maybe do some research,
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
out,
It's kind of, again, considering what am I looking for? What is it that I want to be working on? And kind of then, as you are researching and looking, kind of tailoring it to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anything else came up you wanted to add?
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much
Thank you.
for joining me, Lindsey. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the listeners to tuning into this episode of Holy Hodgepodge. Be sure to tune in to the next episode of Holy Hodgepodge, where you never know what you're going to get. Goodbye.